This is not a suicide note. 3 months ago, I found out my uncle had passed away. We weren't very close, but in his will, he left me one of his houses. I was touched, but all I wanted to do was sell it. I was a fairly new father to twin girls, and I didn't need anything else to manage right now. To speed up the process, I decided to travel across the country to live in the house until the sale was final. Since my job only required a laptop and a phone, I was approved to temporarily work remotely. Unfortunately, my wife had to stay behind for her job, so I had to come alone. Initially, I saw it as a mini vacation. I'd hoped it would only last a week, but the process was more complicated than I thought. A realtor was handling most of the things, but I'm still here a month later. I immediately noticed that things were off. Items wouldn't be where I last placed them. I'd see shadows in the corner of my eye. I was constantly losing my perception of time. I assumed it was the stress, the loneliness. Aside from the realtor coming by a few times with potential buyers, the house was the quietest place I had ever been in my life. I was just about to completely lose my mind when the neighbour came by with a dog. She was an older woman and explained that she had been looking after the dog while my uncle was in the hospital. Since I had arrived, she figured I should take Buster, a golden retriever. I figured the neighbour might be forgetful because she thought my uncle had just passed away last week. Anyway, I instantly fell in love with Buster, and his presence was exactly what I needed. I even thought he'd be a great gift to bring home to my daughters. I hoped my wife felt the same way. However, I noticed that even the dog could tell there was a problem with the house. Buster quickly got used to the new living arrangement, but would never willingly go upstairs. That wasn't a problem for me at the time. I figured it would make it easier to keep track of him. Then, Buster disappeared. Literally 1 second he was standing behind me, and I was opening the snack jar to give him a treat. I only took my eyes off him for a moment to replace the jar, and then he was gone. I ran throughout the entire house, calling his name. The kitchen was connected to the living room, with the master bedroom and an office on the other end of it. The other end of the kitchen led to a dining room that also connected to the living room, and the entryway with stairs leading to the second floor. Once you went upstairs, you had the option to go right or left across a balcony that overlooked the living room on one side and the entryway on the other. Going left immediately opened up to a guest bedroom and a playroom. Going right led to 2 guest bedrooms and a bathroom at the end of the hall. I looked in every room and had to accept that the dogs somehow got outside, even though there were no doggy doors, and every door and window was closed and locked. So I searched the surrounding neighbourhood for another hour, and then gave up. I was about to look into making flyers when I opened the front door and heard Buster sprint toward me from the kitchen. I was overjoyed, of course, but I couldn't fathom how I had missed him. I let Buster sleep in the bed with me that night. In retrospect, it was a huge mistake, but it made me feel better at the moment. But things picked up, and soon I forgot about all the weirdness with the house. Clients were constantly calling, but we were doing a lot of business, and I signed multiple major contracts back to back. I was working day and night, but I knew I'd get a promotion once I returned to the main office. A few times I'd get lost in a phone call or a spreadsheet, only to suddenly realise the air had turned to night. I was so engrossed in work that I wouldn't hear Buster whine for food or to go outside. I started setting alarms so I could keep track, but I had too many important clients to slow down. I was on top of the world and on edge, but my health was beginning to fail. Sometimes I would forget to eat or even sleep. I was even starting to be better about looking after Buster than I was myself. Then my cheer came to an end with a loud bang. Literally, Buster was whining behind me as I finished up yet another spreadsheet. Then we both heard an upstairs door slam. For the first time since I took him in, Buster ran upstairs alone. I was almost ready to call the police, but with the phone in my hand, I felt stupid. I started doubting that I had heard anything at all. And if it had been an intruder, Buster would have surely made more noise. So I mustered up all my courage and crept upstairs with a skillet as my weapon. The upstairs was dark, but the moonlight coming in from the downstairs windows was enough for me to make out Buster standing in front of the bathroom. I had deliberately closed every door when I was last up here looking for the missing dog, but this door was now wide open. I flipped the hallway light switch, but nothing happened. Since I didn't have a better idea, I raised my skillet and slowly walked toward the bathroom. There were no windows here, so it was completely dark inside. I was terrified. Strangely, Buster seemed frozen. His tail was standing straight up, and he was just standing there, looking toward the doorway. I tried to take it as a good sign that he still wasn't barking. That was what finally urged me to cross the threshold and enter the bathroom. My eyes were constantly adjusting to the dark, and the bathroom was small enough that someone couldn't be in there without me noticing. I was beginning to feel relieved when I took a step and felt something sticky under my foot. It suddenly dawned on me that my cell phone was in my pocket. I took it out and turned it on to shed some light on the floor. I instantly dropped it when I saw the bright red liquid surrounding my feet. I fled upstairs, and that triggered Buster to follow me. I didn't hesitate to call the police this time. Luckily, there was already a patrol car nearby, so 2 officers came in a few minutes. Their powerful flashlights cut through the darkness, but they soon found there wasn't a problem with the upstairs lights. It seemed I had a problem with my plumbing, as they said the accumulation from upstairs was just rusty water. At their insistence, I climbed the stairs again and clearly saw a murky brown puddle of water in the bathroom. The noise must have been the pipe bursting. Both cops teased me, but were otherwise understanding. They even gave me the number of a good plumber, but my cell phone was ruined because I dropped and left it in the puddle. I'd have to use the single landline in the kitchen from now on. I waved them goodbye and promised to call the plumber first thing in the morning. Still, no matter how tired I was, I couldn't sleep from the excitement, so I stayed up to prepare more important documents for my company. Before I knew it, Buster had made another mess in the living room. I was so tired and I said things to Buster that I probably shouldn't have, and I did things to him that I definitely shouldn't have. I decided to do something about the stress I was under and spoke to my boss that same morning. Surprisingly, they were happy to give me a week off as a sort of mental vacation. Just like that, all my pending work was taken away. With nothing else to do, I tried to focus on Buster. I played games with him and gave him plenty of treats to make up for my earlier neglect. Then I found the first message. I didn't notice it for a while because I avoided the second floor, but I realised that I hadn't actually called the plumber. Before calling, I went upstairs to see if things had gotten any worse. Instead, I immediately saw a message written in red on the hallway wall. It said, "Losing your mind?" For a second, yes, I think I did. The thought that someone had snuck in while I was home terrified me to death, presumably while I was asleep. I won't reiterate everything I said or did right after, except to say that I hadn't gotten any braver since the noise. I finally opened my bedroom door and made my way toward the kitchen, with Buster going in front. I called the police again. The same 2 officers were able to come, and then we slowly cleared every inch of the house. We didn't find anyone though. Everything was locked up. No sign of forced entry. The police took me seriously, which surprised me at the moment, and they admitted that this wasn't the first house in this neighbourhood to have experienced this. There had been a series of break-ins where nothing had been stolen, but the officers still offered to keep a car outside for the night. Even though I accepted, I soon realised that I would never be able to sleep in this house tonight. So I called my only friend in the city, and actually the only friend in the whole state, an old college roommate who happened to live 30 minutes away. He offered to pick up me and Buster in a couple of hours, so I busied myself packing. I didn't know how long I would need, so I packed up pretty much everything I brought to the house. I left my room to get the dog toys, which is when my friend called to say he was waiting outside. I decided to hang up and immediately meet him. I needed human companionship, and he could help me move my stuff, but the driveway was empty. No friend, no car. I instantly called him back, and he insisted he was outside. I listened as he got out of his car and walked toward the front door. He knocked, and I heard the door open and an elderly woman greeting him. My friend asked for me by name and mentioned my uncle. The woman said she had never heard of either of us. After thanking her, my friend drove off and asked me if I had heard all that. I told him I must have given him the wrong address. I quickly told him the correct one and confirmed that he was there. After asking him to wait, I left the house again. I walked down the street and looked at the numbers written on the sidewalk and the mailbox, only there were no numbers. Just the message, "Losing your mind," on the sidewalk, written in red. The urge to immediately leave was too great. I could just start walking and never stop, but I needed to get my things, and more importantly, Buster, so I went inside the house one last time. When I returned to the room, my suitcase was empty. Everything I had spent the last hour packing was back where it belonged. Despite how impossible this was, I only had one goal to focus on. We needed to go. I put a leash on Buster, and I was shocked at how tired he looked. I resolved to make it up to him when all this was over. I tried to walk out the front door as if nothing was wrong, but I couldn't open it. The knob freely turned, but the bolt wouldn't slide back. I was truly terrified now, but Buster's presence helped. I knelt to hug him, and as he licked my face, he gave me an idea. Whatever was happening, it wasn't the result of a maniac hiding in my house. Still, I didn't know what forces were up against me, so I walked to the backyard and loudly said, "All right, Buster, time for a little walk." The glass door slid open easily. Buster happily bolted outside. I guess it had been a long time since I had taken him out. I followed more hesitantly and looked at the backyard up close for the first time. A wrought iron fence surrounded the yard, and there were gaps Buster could slide through. And then I saw it. A tree growing very close to the fence with a few branches extending over and across the fence. I assumed the gate would also be supernaturally locked. So this was my way out. Buster didn't need any encouragement. He patiently waited on the other side as I painfully pulled myself up and over the fence. I was suddenly aware of how weak and tired my recent lifestyle had made me. While I was in the process of climbing down the tree on the other side, Buster let out a single howl, and then he bolted like an arrow toward a nearby hill. I jumped down and gave chase. He disappeared over the hill, and I struggled to catch up to him on the surprisingly steep surface. Luckily, I found a place where someone had laid down stone bricks on the side for an easier climb out. It was still steep enough that I had to focus on placing my feet correctly. So I was looking down when my next reach stuck my hand to the carpet. I looked up in astonishment, seeing the second floor landing. I looked down, seeing the rest of the stairs leading to the entryway and the living room. Buster was nowhere to be seen. Dejected and very tired, I climbed the last few steps and sat on the landing for a while, occasionally calling for Buster. Finally, the kitchen landline rang. I figured whatever ghosts were bothering me couldn't stop outside forces from helping. I scrambled down the stairs and fell hard onto the cold tiles below, but I was only dazed for a second, and soon I was in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. My wife's warm voice filled me with hope. She was worried because she hadn't heard from me in a while. I couldn't even remember the last time I had tried. She was trying to tell me she hadn't heard from me in a week, and I was trying to tell her to call the police. But her words made me pause. "What do you mean?" "I was given a week off," I asked. "Honey, I thought you had to keep working as soon as you got there." Yeah, but they gave me a week off because of all the stress I was under." "Wait a second, how long have I been here?" "Honey, you've been gone for almost 9 days. My stomach knotted, but without hesitation, I said, "Listen, you need to call the police. There's a problem. I think I'm having a medical emergency." I was trying to make up an excuse just to limit the number of follow-up questions. But I realised this was actually the most likely explanation. Maybe I was just suffering from a gas leak or a brain tumour. Ironically, either one of those options seemed more preferable than living in a haunted house. "Baby, what is it? Are you okay?" my wife asked. I thought I saw a shadow move out of the corner of my eye as I replied, "Yes, I'm fine, but no, I need help. There's a problem with this house. You're being ridiculous. Just listen to me. Call the police and tell her my uncle's name. Tell them to come to this house, and maybe an ambulance is needed. Please help. You're the only one who can help me. Please help. Please," with a cherry on top. I looked down at the phone in my hand as my wife's voice kept coming from the phone. She sounded like her, but in a mocking tone I had never heard from her before. "Are you tummy hurting? When did you last eat? I wonder what Buster tastes like," she said. My blood ran cold. I slammed the phone down, but whatever was on the other side was right. My tummy was hurting. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten. Just in time, I heard Buster whine from upstairs. As I started to rush toward the stairs, I noticed how bruised and sore my legs were from that fall. I pushed through the pain and climbed the stairs one more time. Buster was in front of the bathroom again, lying on his side and looking thinner than when I saw him. Losing your mind was now written everywhere, including the ceiling and the floor. I no longer had any doubt that the messages were written in blood, with some still dripping. I walked over and picked up Buster, just as a noise started at my front door. I would have jumped if Buster hadn't weighed me down. I heard the front door open and whoever it was announced themselves as the police. I even recognised the voice as one of the officers who had visited earlier. Why can't I remember his name? After shouting that I was upstairs, I turned with Buster to find that the hallway in front of me had extended many times its original length. As thin as he looked, Buster felt heavier than ever. I knew this was all some sort of trick just to prevent me from making contact with the police officer. I should have thought that I really was talking to my wife. She must have been able to call the police, and the ghosts just messed up the end of the call. So I started my walk toward the stairs, dragging my feet as fast as I could while shouting the entire way. But then a voice answered the police officer. A woman's voice, my wife's voice. I heard her say, "I'm sorry, my husband wasn't feeling well. He's resting in the bedroom." "Can I help you?" I shouted as loudly as I could to draw attention, but it was no use. I heard the officer say, "I'd still like to check on him." Of course, please come in." Right over here, it was a complete nightmare. I was sweating profusely, with every step seemingly getting me nowhere. I tried to speed up, but the hallway just extended more. And then I heard a man's blood-curdling scream from downstairs. Suddenly the hallway retracted, and I found myself somehow at the top of the stairs. My momentum was unstoppable. I fell down the stairs and landed hard on the floor, on top of Buster. He howled in pain, but he was alive at least. I saw a long, thick trail of blood leading around the corner and under my closed bedroom door. There was still a shadow under the door. I crawled into the kitchen and retrieved my trusty skillet, then crept back to the bedroom door as quietly as I could. My eyes nervously watched the moving shadows. Whatever was waiting in there had killed a man. That meant it could kill me, but if it could have a physical effect, surely it was also susceptible to a physical effect. So I raised my skillet and slowly started turning the handle. Before I got too far, the door opened by itself and something instantly turned towards me. I swung my skillet down. The policeman stood facing me, a smile frozen on his face. We both looked down at the knife buried in his chest. My hand was still wrapped around the handle. He fell to the side and I fell backward, landing heavily on the now clean floor. I was sure I had grabbed my skillet. I could remember the weight of it, but I also remembered going into the kitchen and taking out the knife. I seriously wondered if I were losing my mind. I looked down to find the knife in my hand. I immediately dropped it and crawled back to check on Buster. He wasn't moving. I laid my head down beside him, and feeling that he was still warm but not breathing crushed me. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. I did nothing for a long time. I was numb, but somehow I made it to the couch in the living room. I waited there until the evening fell, and then I slept on the couch. When I woke up, I waited some more. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but nothing terrible was happening to me while I waited. I wasn't in a hurry to change that, but the bodies of Buster and the policeman were still there. I needed to do something. My stomach growled when I finally stood up from the couch. That was just another problem with staying put. First, I found a shovel in an outside closet attached to the backyard porch. Digging the hole was exhausting, so I only decided to bury Buster for now. I planned to get to the policeman after I found something to eat. I hugged Buster and carried him outside. His fur was still so warm. It was hard to believe he was gone. But there was no life behind his big brown eyes. I gently laid him in the hole and got to work. A while later, I wandered into the kitchen and ransacked the pantry. The house was silent except for my efforts. Any moment I stopped moving, the silence was complete. I wondered if the ghosts were just trying to turn me into a killer after all. Now that they had accomplished their goals, maybe they would leave me alone for a while. Just in time, because I was starving and didn't need any more distractions. I opened a box of cereal and paused as I brought a handful to my lips. How did I know that I was really eating what I was looking at? What if I had actually opened a box of rat poison? I was still unsure about what these ghosts were capable of. I imagined the food turning into worms after it entered my mouth. With that thought, I tossed the cereal to the floor and hobbled away, no longer hungry. I needed to focus my efforts on leaving this place. Just in time, I walked past the front door. It was wide open. Instinctively, I made a dash for it, stopping only a metre short of the door, with my hand outstretched before I paused. This had to be another trick. I could just see the door slamming in my face, and perhaps taking a few of my fingers with it. I could feel a breeze entering the house, but I was too scared to move. This was the most impossible situation I had ever been in or even heard of. All my senses had failed me before. However, the need for freedom finally moved my feet. As I slowly walked out of the house, I saw the police car parked right in my driveway. The door lock was open, and the keys were sitting on the front seat. My mind raced as it tried to explain the situation. Maybe the policeman was secretly a killer and had killed the previous owners of this house. Maybe his sacrifice helped them move on. I couldn't come up with another explanation for my good fortune at the moment, so I just suppressed my worries and got in. I drove out of the neighbourhood without incident, but I had new problems. I was in an unfamiliar city, driving a police car with no money or possessions on me, and no idea what I was going to do next. So I kept driving. It felt good to be rid of that house. It felt good to see the sun. So I kept driving, non-stop, left turn, right turn, left turn, right turn. I had no idea where I was going. And then I realised I hadn't seen another car on the road for a while. Where was everyone? Where was I? That knotted feeling happened again, in the pit of my stomach, but also all around my body. I slumped back into the car seat, and then I realised I was sitting on a couch. Back in the living room of my uncle's house, my arms were still raised, as if I were holding a steering wheel. I stood up and started crying in frustration as I screamed. How long had I been sitting there, moving my arms up and down like a lunatic with a stupid grin on my face? I turned around and saw my work laptop on the dining room table. It was open and glaring at me. I walked toward it and saw that something was already typed out in this post. It said, "Losing your mind? Good, now you won't mind losing the rest of it." Suddenly my fist felt heavy. I raised it and found another kitchen knife into my hand. I instantly dropped it. I deleted the message and started typing a request for help. I ignored the screen and only focused on the keys, but I kept hitting the wrong ones, and another message slowly formed. "I'm sorry, I failed all of you. One last time, goodbye, I could have screamed again. But I noticed something had changed. I wasn't in the dining room anymore. I was in the office. I kept typing and typing and typing, and my own words started coming out. I sent out emails asking for help, posted on the local police department's Facebook asking for aid, and just tried to keep typing no matter what. This is my last attempt to keep my sanity. Whenever I try to take a break, I find myself in a new room with new horrors descending on me. One time, I opened the office door to a hellish landscape and almost stepped onto lava. I wasn't sure if it was all an illusion, but I didn't want to even see the image of my feet burning, so I closed the door and kept typing. I'm not even sure if this is all caused by ghosts. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and the truth is, I have no idea what's going on. While going through these crazy events, I realised I couldn't remember my uncle's name, or what he looked like. I'm not sure if I even have an uncle. I'm trying really hard to think about how I got here. Did I fly? Did I drive? I can't remember. Have I always been here? Even weirder, I can't remember my realtor's name, or even their gender. I met with them in person multiple times. Why don't I know the things I should know? I can't even remember my daughter's or my wife's name. Am I even a father? Am I even a person? I must be, because I'm here typing in this small office. But now that I think about it, I can't remember who my parents were, what they looked like, or anything about my childhood. Now, I only remember this house and all the nightmares I've experienced here, awake or otherwise. It feels a lot like my feeling in the police car. I found a way forward, but I don't really know what to do next. This isn't a life to live, and I'm getting more and more tired. I'm so hungry, and I'm having trouble focusing. I keep hearing voices, and they're getting louder and louder. I know if I stop typing, I won't last long, but I'm running out of things to say. My hands are tired. T-red so tie-red. A B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. I must keep typing, but I don't know what to say anymore. What's my name? I don't know. If I stop typing, I'll die. If I stop working, I'll die. A B, C, E, R, G, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, Q, P, R, S, T, U, V, W, Y, X, A, N, D, Z. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. Dogs, Buster. I miss Buster. I wish I could have hugged him one last time. But was he ever real? Was anything? I'm so tired. I'm so hungry. I have to focus. The quick brown I'm sorry jumped over the lazy dogs. The quick brown I'm sorry jumped over the lazy goodbye. I'm quick, I failed all of you. Jumped over the lazy dogs, I'm sorry. I failed all of you lazy. For the lazy dogs, goodbye. I'm sorry. I failed all of you. One last time, goodbye.